The Pacific Island countries with beautiful scenery were a peaceful place on our blue planet. But someone disturbed the peace. According to the international campaign to abolish nuclear weapons, more than 350 nuclear test explosions have been conducted across the South Pacific by France, Britain, and the US. In 1946, the US began using the Marshall Islands as a nuclear testing site and carried out 67 tests within 12 years. On March 1, 1954, Castle Bravo, the largest thermonuclear device ever donated by the US, exploded at the Bikini Atoll in the Marshall Islands. The explosion was equivalent to 50 megatons of TNT and raised the sea surface temperature to a staggering 55,000 degrees Celsius. The residents were not evacuated until 2.5 days later, after having received near-lethal doses of radiation.
My mother was born on one of the northern atolls in the Marshall Islands called Iluk Atoll. And in 1954, she was about 10 years old, and she remembers hearing the blast of the Bravo test. About a little over 10 years ago, she passed away from stomach cancer, which is a known cancer caused by radiation exposure. And actually, there is some data to show that low-level radiation, for example, in women, can cross through the reproductive system and be transferred, to the children. I believe that there's a chance that I could also develop a radiation-related sickness.
You may ask why the islanders didn't protect against these nuclear tests? Because they had no idea what was happening.
We did not have a word for bomb. We did not have a word for contamination even. Nobody came to evacuate us or warn us.
Abigail Anya Madison, former senator of the Marshall Islands, said in the 2014 Vienna Conference on the humanitarian impact of nuclear weapons.
Nobody knew what it was, and so, people let it touch their skin. Children opened their mouths thinking that it was maybe snow. But of course, all of that came clear very quickly that this was extremely dangerous radioactive ash that was causing skin burns and hair loss.
According to a United Nations Special Rapporteur investigation in 2012, after the Bravo nuclear test, the US carried out a secret program to treat the people of Marshall Islands. The program involved 539 subjects, including children. Some were injected with the radioisotopes and subjected to inhuman treatment without their prior or even informed consent. Now the era of nuclear tests has long passed, but the consequences remain. A large amount of public data show that residents in Pacific Island countries are more likely to suffer from diseases such as leukemia and thyroid cancer. According to an investigative report by the United Nations Human Rights Council in 2012, several years after exposure to nuclear radiation, a high incidence of thyroid cancer was reported in the Marshall Islands, as well as an unusual high prevalence of stunted growth among local children. The nuclear tests have not only harmed local residents' health, but also contaminated the islands they rely on. In the 1970s, the US built a giant nuclear waste site called Rolling Dome on the Atlantic Atoll of the Marshall Islands. More than 100,000 cubic meters of radioactively contaminated soil and debris was sealed under this dome.
If the goal was to make the environment around it safe enough for people either to live or to collect food or to grow crops, that certainly didn't happen. What we know from the studies by the US Department of Energy is that more than 99% of the radiation at Eniwetok is outside the dome.
Independent researchers at the Center for Nuclear Studies, Columbia University, warned in April 2022 that leakage from the dome, which already occurred, was likely to increase in higher tides caused by climate change, threatened to break the structure open in the coming decades. The researchers call on the US government to publish the area of contamination and take responsibility for mitigating the pollution. However, not much has been done. In October 2021, U.S. Representative Katie Porter pressed the Biden team on Marshall Islands nuclear waste, but got a few answers. In the same month, Rhea Moss Christian mentioned the unresolved issue of claims at the hearing on the U.S. nuclear legacy in the Marshall Islands. She noted that the last compensation award and initial payment were made in December 2008, leaving over $23 million in unpaid personal injury awards and over $2 billion in unpaid property damage awards. Recently, the Pacific Network on Globalization, a non-governmental organization based in Fiji, issued a statement calling for states parties to the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons to prioritize and address the harm caused by nuclear tests.
I choose to be optimistic that this new generation of leaders will find a way to make some progress and to help people find justice or to find some peace.